I was saying that liberalism or idealism is the second grand theory that we're covering, because it is one of the older theories of international relations. And just like one reason for the problematic size of feet was high heels and the other was gravity, liberalism is a second explanation of how the world works, okay? How international affairs work in reality. So again, this is quite a state-centric theory, but liberalism does not only focus on states, it also focuses on other actors such as individuals, international organizations, groups such as terrorist groups is something that liberals would be interested in. So it's not just states, but additional actors are also the things that liberals are interested in, explaining how the world works. Now guys, realism does not ignore all the other actors. They just believe that state is the most important actor that leads to how the system works, okay? So don't misunderstand. Realism has different trends, different subgroups, sub-theories, and they don't ignore or they don't really think that, these are not important. Realists actually say nation state is the main unit and they're the most important unit, okay? Liberals say, well, there are many most important units in the system. That's the difference between these two theories. Now, liberalism is also a systemic theory, because in liberalism also, the assumption is that this system here is anarchical. There is lack of central authority. Here's the thing. The difference between realism and liberalism does not come from the difference of assumptions, but it comes from the conclusions that they arrive at, okay? So when you look at the international system and say, well, the system is anarchical, as a result there will be a lot of conflict, is one perspective, and is the realist perspective. The second perspective is, yes, the system is anarchical, however, the game is not a zero-sum game, so you don't have to lose when I win. We can both win, and as a result, the system does not have to be so conflictual. See, they start from the same point, but in by the end of the theory, you actually arrive at different conclusions, okay? So the liberals are more optimistic about how international affairs function, how the world works. Realism says, because we are in constant power struggle, in the end, it's very difficult to cooperate with one another. So in the end, there will be a lot of conflict. But according to liberalism, okay, fine, we're all on our own. States are trying to survive in the system, but they don't necessarily have to fight with one another. They can and should cooperate. So the whole thing is difference of mentality, okay, guys? I'm pretty sure that your fathers or mothers look at things differently than you do. The sad truth is, as time goes by, I start to understand their views. And the sad part for me is I start to agree with them. So the mentality that they had at one point was something that I did not agree with, because their worldview was different than mine. As I got older, I got more experience, and at this point in my life, I agree with a lot of the things that they used to tell me, because I had to go through the same experiences that they did many years ago. Now my worldview is closer to their worldview. So different theories are about not ideologies, but worldviews, okay? I think I heard someone say ideology. Well, theories are not ideologies. They are reflections of worldviews. How you view the world. Well, I'm a more optimistic person. So So I might actually find liberalism more plausible, more logical than realism, just because I'm a more optimistic kind of person. And you might actually, Burak might be a more pessimistic kind of person. And he might actually find the realist theory closer to his understanding of the world. Okay, guys? That's how people define themselves as realist or liberal, because their worldview, their upbringing, their experiences might be more in line with one theory as opposed to another theory. Okay? So these are not ideologies that you subscribe to. These are different worldviews that you can find more familiar. Okay? Now, as you see, from my example, liberalism is more optimistic because liberalism doesn't think that a self-help system, the anarchical system with a lack of central authority, in the end will lead to conflicts all the time. Instead, they say, if we concentrate on economic power instead of military power, we can have a peaceful world. Okay? So let's actually focus on trade. Trading states, liberals will argue, will hardly ever fight with one another. Okay? Or let's focus on democracy. Democratic states will hardly ever fight with one another. And they call this democratic peace. Okay? That observation is called the democratic peace proposition. So as we become more modernized, again in connection to economy, right? We're not going to fight as much with one another. These ideas are liberal ideas, okay? So the liberals, idealists, will value ideas and ideals, and they're going to believe that war can be avoided, conflict can be avoided by establishing collective security. What's collective security?
NATO.
What?
NATO.
NATO? So you get together in a multilateral setting. Remember Concert of Europe? Okay. So you get together in an international organization that's more complex than Concert of Europe. And you establish this organization so that the organization will defend all the states that subscribe to that organization. Okay? So the liberals believe that UN, for example, should work. And liberals believed that League of Nations should work. Who's the most famous liberal idealist that you can think of?
Adam Smith.
What's that?
Adam Smith.
I'm talking about an idealist, actually a state leader, who actually calls himself an idealist. Wilson, right? Wilson. American President Wilson, between the First World War and the Second World War, he argues that if we could have a collective security organization, then a disaster like the First World War will not be experienced again. Okay? So guys like Wilson believe that states with common ideals, such as liberal ideas, get together, they will be able to stop wars. Did it work?
No.
League of Nations did not work. So between the First World War and the Second World War, liberals are very popular. But once the League of Nations fails and the Second World War takes place, then people will say liberalism is discredited, and most people will not really want to hear more about liberalism during the Cold War. The popular idea will be bipolarity and Cold War. Okay, I'll get to that. So you can see that certain theories are more popular depending on what's going on in the world that day, okay, or in that period. Yes?
Can you say the cause of the Second World War is the island symbol?
Can we say that? Well, from a scientific perspective, no, we can't. we can actually argue that the League of Nations, and that is the most common argument, League of Nations lacked very important practical things, such as a peacekeeping or peace-building force. So there was no military associated with the League of Nations. And another one was that US was not actually part of League of Nations. US was the initiator of the idea, but the organization did not have the US in it. And the League of Nations didn't really have the institutions that are necessary in an international organization to help create a peaceful world, okay? So the failure of League of Nations was a huge reason why these states did not have a platform to talk to one another or to stop the war. But was it the only cause? From a realist perspective, no. From a realist perspective, League of Nations didn't really matter much anyways, because the world was trying to, the states were trying to increase their power levels, and as a result, there was power struggle, and in this power struggle, there was a multipolar system, and from a realist perspective, that was the major cause of war, okay, from a new realist perspective. So guys, when we talk about causes of wars, or causes of economic crises, of causes of the Arab Spring, revolutions, anything, you can actually look at these world events that take place in the system from different theoretical perspectives. A realist would make completely different comments than a liberal. So a realist can interpret the causes of World War I completely differently than a liberal, okay? So from a liberal perspective, League of Nations was not advanced enough. It didn't have the institutions. From a realist perspective, who really cared about the League of Nations anyways, right? So these are different perspectives, yes.
Well, actually, I would like to call the both world wars as the period of great wars, because I believe you cannot dismantle them from one another.
That's true.
Therefore, what my friends say that is partially true in this manner that idealism could not prevent the war.
Theories do not try to prevent war.
The ideal approach is that.
Okay, so an international relations theory is trying to explain, okay, these events that took place. Can we use theories to try to prevent war?
Yes.
Of course. Why not? But you don't have to.
Yes, what I meant was that using idealism to prevent war is
from a realist perspective, absolutely. But from an idealist perspective, it was actually the failure of collective security because the states did not commit enough to idealism. So from an idealist perspective, it wasn't idealism that led to war, okay? So these theories, like I said, guys, these theories are not ideologies. They are explanations of world affairs. Always remember this example. Okay, the size of feet and age example. So am I trying to actually stop the horrible changes in the size of my feet by using one theory or another? No, I'm trying to understand what's going on so that maybe I can actually stop wearing the high heels, and I did actually. I don't wear high heels anymore. Now that I know that high heels might actually lead to problems with my feet, can I actually stop the force of gravity? If that is the real cause of the problem with my feet, can I stop it? No, I can't. I can try by giving weight, losing weight, so that the gravity will not, well, I'm not going to actually exert more pressure on my feet. So I can try to lose weight, and I am trying to do that. Okay, that's so guys, do you see that? The theories might be used as a solution to stop the problem we're talking about, but not necessarily. Realists will argue that we're explaining and understanding wars. We're not actually in a position to stop wars because most conflict in the international system is unavoidable. Okay? So if you ask a strict realist, they might actually say that there is a certain amount of conflict that we can get rid of, but we're not going to be able to get rid of all conflict. Okay? So I want you to distinguish how you use a theory from an ideology. Okay? So idealism is a theory of international relations. You can use it to stop wars or not. All right? Depends on what you want to do. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, but it's also important to know that they can overlap at times. So the little idea of the state of nature can look very much like how realism would analyze the international system.
Absolutely.
However, liberalism will say that if we introduce certain changes, then that state of nature, which is similar to how the realists look at the international system,
Yeah.
can change it.
Can change things.
So
absolutely.
It's just realists have a degree of fatalism. in terms of how
That's true. That's why I said realism to a certain extent pessimistic. It has a fatalist perspective into it. Guys, next week when I start talking about post-systemic or non-systemic theories, you're going to see that there are theories, like critical theories, that say we need to change the world. Like a theory has actually need to change the world. That's a different perspective. With these that I'm discussing today, that's not the perspective, okay? So it depends on what the theory is trying to achieve. For realism and liberalism, the main idea, the main goal of a theory is to understand and explain the world, not necessarily cure it, okay?
But sometimes, for example, realism may be more rational to people because it's better explained what goes on the ground. However, the role of theory is not just to explain, it can also be to shape what's on the ground. And that's why liberalism should not be so easily dismissed.
Yep. It's an epistemological approach. Okay, guys? How do you approach knowledge? How do you approach to what theory is for? You're going to talk about this in your IR theory classes, but let me just contribute to that debate a little bit. Depending on your personal choice, you might actually think that a theory should change the world, revolutionize the world. Or, depending on your choice, if you pick realism, you just say, I'm looking at an objective reality here, and I'm an observant. I don't necessarily try to change the reality. I'm just trying to tell you what the reality is. Okay? So, realism also argues that actors are rational, meaning they're trying to maximize gains and minimize losses. And if you are trying to maximize gains, you actually will believe that you should win as much as possible. Okay? So the more, the better is basically the mentality there. Like I said, all I want you to think of here is these two theories, realism and liberalism, develop as rivals to one another, okay? And their view is more positivist. And in that positivist view, they're trying to explain worldviews. They're trying to understand what's going on in the world, not necessarily change the world or emancipate people, as critical theories that we will discuss next week will argue. Okay? So, realism, liberalism, older theories, and they actually are rivaling one another. And during the Cold War, another theory becomes really popular, neorealism. Many types of neorealism exist. I'm just going to give you a general overview of neorealism. New realism is the most systemic theory that we have. It actually believes that all the action is pretty much on system level. There isn't really a huge need to actually look at individual states. Just look at the system and the structure of the system. Believes that state is the main unit, the most important unit, and state functions in an anarchical system. Again, the structure of the system is anarchy. There's lack of central government, no queen, no king, right? So you're all on your own. There's a self-help system. You're trying to self-preserve. You're trying to survive on your own. To that, you're actually trying to balance power again. And the concept of polarity is the addition of new realism to realism. And polarity means, hold on. Okay, I thought I had a figure there. Okay, I'm actually going to have the figure here. Let's just assume that there are states in the system, weak states, and there are middle powers, and then you have stronger superpowers. The number of superpowers in the system means polarity, okay? So when you have one superpower in the international system, that's called unipolarity. Uni meaning one, right? And then when you have 3 to 5 superpowers in the system, or major powers in the system, that means multipolarity. And when you have 2 superpowers in the system, that's called bipolarity. You've heard of these if you're from the IR department. And if you've never heard of these concepts, they're all about power, because realism is all about power. And new realism is all about understanding distribution of power between states. So the system is anarchical, and in this system, how power is distributed in different states is what makes the whole difference in international affairs. So as Turkey increases its power today, it's trying to become a superpower. So I'm talking with the jargon of new realism, okay? And so Turkey is trying to become one of the major powers so that it can actually become a major power in a multipolar system today. If I said anything like that, I'm talking with the new realist jargon, guys, okay? I am looking at polarity. I am looking at number of powerful states. You might think that, wow, that's a very simple way to look at international affairs. Just look at number of superpowers or number of great powers, and you know what will happen in the world. Will there be conflict in the world? Well, it is actually quite a simple, systemic, parsimonious way of looking at international affairs. But in the meantime, it's quite limited, because the only variable you're looking at is power and how many major powers exist. That's it. You're not looking at anything else, okay? And it's enough in this portrayal of the world. Now, according to new realism, balance of power is something that takes place in international affairs. So as soon as I believe that, who was it? Burak is getting more and more powerful, I get into an alliance with Sumi. And it's us against him. We're trying to balance our power against him. But in the meantime, I'm actually trying to become more and more powerful in my own country so that I'm doing internal balancing as well as external balancing. Okay? Alliance is external balancing. Me and increasing my military power inside my state is internal balancing. And as a result, in new realist thinking, just as there was in realism, there's the concept of balance of power. But the most important understanding, or most important hypothesis, educated guess, that Kenneth Waltz, the guy who says all this, puts forward, is if the system is multipolar, then that system is less stable. We expect wars in that system, great power wars in that system. Guys, now look at this. You're looking at how many great powers there are in the system and you're counting them. And you're saying, whoa, it's a multipolar system. I expect trouble. Okay? It's quite a simple way to look at international relations. And it is, for that reason, the most systemic theory of international relations that is available to us. Okay? So, why would a multipolar system be problematic? Yes?
Yeah. Both of the powers aim for purposes aligned with each other.
Okay.
Because if there isn't much space for those powers to sustain their power, when their purposes conflicts more focused.
The theory actually goes, the roots of the theory goes to economic theory, right? There is scarce resources, and you have to share those resources. And the goal is to maximize your power. If you're going to be more and more powerful and there are scarce resources, hey, you're competing with the other states that are becoming, or that are trying to become more powerful. Let's assume that Esra and Celal, Magnus, me, and Sumin are 5 major powers. Usually we have three to 5, according to Kenneth Waltz. That's the secret number, because more than that is difficult to get. And between us, the major powers, the really powerful states here, we don't know who to ally with to balance our power against one another. So there's uncertainty in multipolar systems, according to Kenneth Waltz. Now, I'll just give you one example. How do you feel about this? What did I say to her? You don't know? Did I? What do you think?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure?
Since twice.
Okay. What do you think, Magnus? Did you feel nervous?
I think you should better work out to be stronger.
Okay. The moment you see me getting closer with her, you started working out. Because you're internal balancing, right? Did you actually think that you should get into an external balancing action? Did you think that you should turn to Celal and get into an alliance? Okay, why not? Why not? That would be great, right? And Celal is kind of like, what's going on there? And Sumin is like, I don't know. I don't know if I like this. Okay? What did I tell you? Did you hear what I told you? You didn't hear what I told you. I actually told you, let's get into an alliance and get rid of these guys. Quite evil, isn't it? So I was actually trying to get into a secret alliance with her, and in this 5 great power system, you guys got really nervous. And honestly, according to neorealism, you're right in getting really nervous. Okay? Let's try it all again. Did you hear what I said? Yes. Okay.
But this time they
How do you feel?
Depends, because we don't know our circumstances, so there could be a strong international legal system which is quite efficient, and so we feel comfortable. Because we know that this.
Would you feel comfortable at all the moment I go to her and I approach her? According to neorealism, you're not going to be very comfortable the moment I approach her. Because I might actually be saying, Jalal is a pain, and we actually really have to beat him down. That must be what I actually told her. Okay? There is constant suspicion of the intentions of other states in the world portrayed here. Okay? In this world, suspicion is an uncertainty, and mistrust is quite common. Okay? It's very widespread. Sumin is not feeling so well about what just went on. Magnus, you probably didn't feel that great, and neither did you. What did I tell you in English? Together. So I was just saying, let's just go out and drink something after class, which had nothing to do with you. It was just, I was trying to be friends. It wasn't a secret alliance or a strategic alliance. But you don't know the difference, okay? So according to these guys, the neorealists, the intentions cannot be known in multipolarity, and there are too many different possibilities of alliances. One day I can do this, and then the next day I can go to Magnus and I can actually say the same thing to him, and I can sell you out. Okay? So there's always the risk of buck passing. Buck passing means selling out your alliance. Okay? I just made an alliance with you, and I just sold out that alliance by getting into an alliance with you, and in reality, you guys are enemies. Okay? When that's the case, there is quite uncertainty and miscommunication. Today, I was at my war course, and in the war course, I said this was a huge problem before the World War I because Willy-Niki telegrams. Had anybody heard of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Cousins.
So the Kaiser and the Tsar in Russia were actually sending telegrams to each other
Let's don't do this.
before the First World War, and they were actually trying to negotiate. But it didn't work out because there was miscommunication and there was distrust. While they were still sending each other telegrams, the armies were mobilizing, which sent really, really bad signals to one another. And both Wilhelm and Nicola became more and more paranoid. Okay? So in a multipolar world, according to these guys, there's the risk of backpassing, selling out your alliances. There's the horrible situation of uncertainty. There are too many alliances that could take place, and secret alliances that could have taken place in these five superpowers. And finally, there's the risk of chain ganging, which means I can drag my allies to a war. Okay? So chain ganging is when a smaller power gets into an alliance with a larger power. Let's assume Esra is a larger power than I am, stronger than me. And I am dragging her into a war with Jalal and Magnus just because I have a problem with you guys. Okay? So multipolarity is the way to predict what will happen. Okay? So it's very simplistic, very parsimonious, simple, because it only looks at the number of superpowers in the system. And the moment it sees, oh, there are 3 to 5 powers, that's trouble. We don't want that. Okay? That's how Kenneth Waltz explained the world wars, both the First World War and the Second World War. Okay? Now, guys, another hypothesis is that while multipolarity is quite problematic, bipolarity when you have two superpowers, is quite a stable system, okay? So these guys look at the system, again, once again, count how many superpowers there are, and when there are two, as in the example of Cold War, they say, okay, this is a more stable system. Why do you think that Cold War is predicted as stable by Kenneth Waltz?
Because they didn't go nuclear.
Because there was no major war between Soviet Union and the United States. So when the only superpowers are Magnus and me, you have to take sides. In this classroom, which is my international system here, you actually have to pick sides. You either are picking his side or my side. And there aren't really many secrets. There aren't many different configurations of alliances, okay? Jedi will most probably pick Magnus because he's closer in terms of borders, okay? And in my case, I will most probably pick you, or you will pick me. I'm the superpower, so you pick me, right? As an ally, because you're closer to me and you know that I'm really strong and you know that I can protect you. Same thing with you, okay? You're actually picking your sides, and once you pick your sides, there aren't much of a question mark there. So the NATO countries versus the Warsaw Pact countries picked their sides, right? There wasn't a question mark. We knew who was picking what, okay? There are exceptions to this. Most of the time, the exceptions are Middle Eastern countries, and that are arguably picked one side or another depending on who would give them more. Egypt is usually given as, Nasser is given as an example most of the time. But the Cold War is a portrayal of a bipolar system where there was no major power war, major power confrontation. Now guys, can we actually say that Cold War was extremely peaceful? Korean War? Vietnam War? Proxy wars. Okay. Soviet Union and the United States did not fight one another, but weren't there wars? Yes. Of course. But they were not global wars. So from these theories' perspective, you can argue that if there is not a superpower war, then the system is accepted as stable. Do you agree with that? Not necessarily, okay? But what's the reason? What's the reason that these guys accept the Cold War period as peaceful?
Because there was not necessarily, obviously, trying to balance them. So,
okay.
if you have a measure on the unipolar system, then the smaller states will try to ally and balance against you.
Okay. So the sides are known, right? For the smaller states as well.
Cuban Missile Crisis.
There were crises, but they didn't turn into wars between the superpowers. What was the huge success, guys, that's accepted by these theories, especially by realism, neorealism? What's the huge success of the Cold War? We still have a planet that's intact, right? We actually did not destroy the whole world in a nuclear war. That is actually a huge success. So according to neorealism, the bipolar system during the Cold War, which actually was quite a consequence of nuclear balance of power, prevented a huge world war. It prevented the Third World War, so it was actually stable. Now, I, on the other hand, would like to draw your attention to something else. If you were Korean, would you think that the Cold War period was peaceful? If you were Vietnamese, if you were Middle Eastern,
Or Algeria.
or any other place during the Cold War that experienced war, hot war, would not agree that neorealism actually predicts well. Now this actually is interesting because critical theories, we'll talk about next week, will become more and more popular in non-Western states, as well as Western states, because neorealism mostly focuses on war and peace in the West. Okay, guys? But please go back to the historical background and think about the historical background again. Think about the debate online at Moodle. What are we debating there? Why did it happen in the West and not the East? Well, it happened in the West and not the East. And as a result, the theories, IR theories, popular IR theories of international affairs focuses on mostly the West and not the East. Okay? That's why, from that perspective, the Cold War era was quite peaceful. Let's stop here. On Thursday, I want you to finish, definitely finish Goldstein and Buzan readings and start Gilpin. You won't be able to finish Gilpin. You'll finish Gilpin next week. Thank you.